Have you been wanting to paint plein air urban scenes but have no idea where to begin? Let me show you how in this video. Hey everybody, welcome back. If you're new, visiting for the first time, thank you very much. If you like what you see in this video, consider subscribing. And if you do so, hit that bell notification icon to be alerted as to when I post new videos. So in this video, what I'm going to discuss is how I go about mapping out a plein air urban scene. And you'll find links in the description below with some of the gear that I use and also other videos related to painting urban paintings. So check those out and let's get started. Hi everybody, welcome back to another plein air episode of doing an urban painting. This scene was right up the street from my house actually. I've driven by it many a time and everything kind of coalesced into the perfect situation here. The light was just great and the viewpoint, as you can see in the inserted photo in the right hand corner there. Just a nice composition with the power poles intersecting in a way that created some nice positive negative shapes. I'm sketching out with transparent red oxide. And you may have seen me in the past use a ruler to strike lines and such, but in this particular piece I'll be doing a lot freehand. And I highly recommend really honing your freehand skills for subjects like this. Try not to rely too much on little tools to do all the work for you. It's really important to control your wrist, eye-hand coordination. Doesn't mean you can't use them, obviously. And now I'm just you saw me before too, kind of map out a few little elements with the brush handle. That's a quick way to do a couple comparisons that were just the height of the building compared to the width. So I can get some basic plane of composition to hone in on for this particular painting. I just want to mention also that the panel I'm working on is a smooth surface. I prefer painting on panels quite a bit because I have the control over the texture, and if I want some texture I can really put it on there, and if I want nice clean controlled areas I have that capability. So I've done, of course, on bigger pieces using canvas because of course the size, panels are heavier, and as you get into a larger format it's easier to have a clean look to the paint. It can be a little trickier on smaller canvases to, if you're into that like I am, to have some controlled line. So you can see in this piece, sorry the camera died so I had to change batteries, so we're kind of jumped ahead a tad, but you can see how I blocked in the cars with just a little of the transparent red oxide. Now I wasn't going for a perfect rendition of a particular car, just the idea that there's a couple cars in this urban setting. And the painting's not about the cars. Now of course if your focus was more closer to the viewer and having the car be a prominent element, you would need to pay a little more attention to certain details to define that vehicle. Now I'm just kind of scrubbing in a few areas where the trees are in the background, and later on that's going to serve as a nice element to set off some darks against lights in the composition to add a little pop. And you can see a pop already starting to happen because of the scaling that I've done over on the right hand side with the power poles in front of the buildings and the power pole in front of the car on the left. So all that adds a little feeling of distance in the painting. Now as I'm kind of scrubbing in the sky, I'm not completely obliterating the white with just one tone of blue. You don't see it because I've edited the video, but reaching down into my pile of paint that I mixed for the sky, I've altered some of the tone with a little more purpley blue, a little more intense blue, a little kind of greenish blue, and that's kind of integrated throughout the sky just subtly to give some variety to that tone, so that it's not just the same thing. Now you can see me just reiterating some of the washed in tones I did before, and I kept those previous layers kind of thin in the beginning because I like to define the composition and really say, yes, this is what I want. And then I could commit to a little thicker paint, which is what I'm doing here. And I highly recommend that as a sort of a way to operate if you're new to this, to try out this technique and see, and let it work for you a bit. And you kind of see so far, I've kind of danced around the painting quite a bit. And I do that because I want to bring up the painting as evenly as I can. What I mean by that is if I was just going from left to right, some people can work in that manner, and I admire that, but it's just not for me. I like to get one relationship in, like starting with the dark tone of that big building, and then start keying in some other big shapes, like the side of the building here. And then as I get to the smaller elements, I'll have something to compare to and not lose the importance of those bigger shapes. You really want to just knock in those bigger forms first and don't get caught up in the detail. And that's for another good reason, is because, on a clear, sunny day such as this, the light pattern can change very quickly, especially at this time of when I was painting this. It's early morning. Sun moves very fast. So you want to really try to capture the elements of cast shadows and that sort of thing. And sometimes, depending on elements like, say, for instance, the cars that could be driven off by somebody, I want to get some of those in quite quickly so that I am able to get some detail in there before they disappear. So it's a push-pull effect always in plein air. You got to be willing to go with the flow, so to speak. And I'm really trying to, when I put some strokes of paint down, really trying to put them in with deliberation and purpose. And I can always, because I want to keep a freshness to the scene. I don't want, like, if the siding was vertical in the building or something like that, some people might use vertical strokes or such. Because of the scale of this piece, I don't want to get too caught up in fine detail and break up those nice big forms in the composition. So I'm just applying the paint and trying to keep energetic brushwork. And when I do my next pass in the studio, we really want to try to retain that freshness. And I think that can be the biggest challenge when we're doing something larger in the studio, is maintaining that freshness. So that's something to think about. Now I'm just kind of putting in some shadows on the poles to start defining those and pull those out and create that spatial distance between objects and really create that contrast. And that's going to really make things start to pop. It's going to be looking pretty strong here momentarily. And all this time, of course, I've been mixing a little bit of the liquid into my paint to keep the flow going. And it's a really beautiful feeling, when you're putting that paint in it, and it really helps you intermix your colors and that sort of thing. Now just popping in some of the vent pipes in the building roof. And again, moving around the piece, getting little elements, bringing out little touches to see how far I need to go with certain details. Now, one key for me was in this foreground with the pavement, I didn't want to just make it flat gray. You want to avoid that. You want to have variations. If you have a big tone of color, you want to have some cools and warms dancing around, and you can see how that's a couple strokes there are nice warmish gray against the cooler grays. And I wanted to strive to have that kind of interest in the pavement. And to be fair, in honesty too, in authentic sort of touch, is pavement there's discrepancy in pavement all the time, either through repairs or it's driven on mostly in one spot and there's dirt stains on the road and that sort of thing. So something to be aware of. You want to really kind of think about what feeds into the story that you're trying to paint and eliminate everything else that does not support that idea. Very critical. Now I'm just kind of softening up some tree edges up near the sky. Now, as you can see, I'm working on that foreground pole. And one thing that's interesting with, you think, oh, I want to put a highlight on the pole. And most, some people might make that highlight too to light and value, and you want to be careful because it's a dark tone already, this dark brown power pole, so it's going to reflect light differently than other lighter toned objects. So your sunlit side of that is really not going to be that light. So just be observant and pay attention when you're looking at something. Don't just rush to put in a color just to put in a color. Just getting the facade of that building over there done. Now we start working on the cars. And because of that building on that yellowish building had that red facade, I wanted to pick that up in other part of the painting so that it wasn't by itself attracting attention near the edge of the painting. So that's why I made this car red. It was just a dark tone car. You can pick whatever color you want. We're plein air painters. I change things for artistic license to feed into supporting the painting. So it's something to have that freedom. Unless you're doing a commission piece and you have to have certain items in there, it's really up to you as an artist to make it a painting. You can bend the rules a bit, even though I try to go out there and paint what I see because nature inspires me and I try to mimic her colors. There are times when you need to push the texture or contrast or saturation to make it a painting. Unfortunately, nature doesn't always present itself perfectly. I also want to make some comments about brushwork. And I tend to hold the brush back as far as I can because it really gives you the ability when you have paint on the bristles to really kind of lay that paint on. If you hold it too close to the ferrule, which is the area just behind the hair of the brush, it gets too much like you're holding a pencil. And number two, you can really disturb some paint you're trying to lay other paint over. So a lot of times I try to keep that brush almost parallel to the surface of the painting in some cases where I'm really trying to lay that paint on and sculpt with. So don't hold your brush too close to the tip. You want to really try to get the touch with holding it further back. I invite everyone watching this, if you have some particular ways you like to start out, when you paint your urban pieces, share those in the comments so other people can see other ways to tackle subjects such as this. It can be very complicated, and I've seen some very complicated scenes painted very well by other artists. And so, hey, as many ideas as we can get out there to help people, that's what it's all about, get the community talking. So, yeah, feel free to leave some comments. We're almost up to the end of this session. It was really about capturing a unique and interesting composition. This was about a 1 hour study, so I will do some more layers in the studio trying to retain that freshness. So if you think of any other questions, I have an answer here on how you might paint an urban painting, or if you want a little more detailed information about issues with things I was doing in this painting, then drop me a line and I'd be happy to respond to you. Take care. Okay, I'm back from the little plein air adventure, and I'm pretty happy with the piece. I got to do some second layers with some color, but as you can see, I got some good composition, which was what I wanted to focus on in the field, along with getting some fast color notes. It's about an hour's study. Just pan in here a bit, pick up some detail. Okay, that's it for this video. Thanks for joining me. And again, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. And for everyone else, thank you for continuing to watch. And you can check out the links below, like I mentioned earlier, about finding links to the gear I use and to other videos that are related to some plein air urban painting. So until next time, bye.